Hey everybody, I thought I would share another one of my 3D models with you, and this time it's kind of like a rite of passage for Star Wars fans, and that's designing your own TIE fighter. But there's a few specific things I wanted to do with this, and firstly, I didn't want it to be just a kit bash of a TIE fighter. I wanted to redesign all the elements. And secondly, I wanted to simplify the wing shape. TIE fighter variants tend to get more complicated. You know, the TIE Advanced adds the bends, the TIE Interceptor adds cutouts and points. I wanted to go the other direction. So I took the basic hexagon wing and sliced the number of vertices in half. So now we've got a triangle. And that had all sorts of logical consequences that really kind of drove a lot of the design of this fighter. For instance, the pointy triangles kind of, feels more aerodynamic. So I thought, okay, maybe this fighter has more atmospheric capabilities than a standard TIE fighter. And you can't, depending on how you orient the wings, which I wanted them pointed forward, it can't really land anymore. So that naturally led to variable geometry, which I thought was a really cool idea for a TIE fighter. I also had some other ideas like, okay, well, if this fighter is kind of correcting some of the limitations of a normal TIE fighter, well, maybe it's also designed around the idea that it's a multi-role fighter that's supposed to be unsupported. So it's not a swarm fighter, it's more of an individualistic fighter. And maybe really far-flung worlds at the edge of the Empire, they can't justify having a whole squadron of TIE fighters, so they have just like 3 or 4 of these that have limited hyperdrive, limited shields. They're far more versatile. They can land on a planet without, like a scaffolding or a rack. They can go into space, but they can also fly in the atmosphere more effectively than a standard TIE fighter. And all of that just kind of fell into place. And I have here the model on Sketchfab, and going along with the atmospheric direction of this fighter is I wanted to make the pylons more like wings. They have this kind of smooth curve wing form. And of course, this is a joke of aerodynamicy. It's probably not that aerodynamic, but it's the feeling that it evokes. You have the recessed guns and these little pointy bits that you see on World War II fighters. And of course, the paint scheme is lifted shamelessly from fighters like the Corsair and the Hellcat. I really love the paint scheme on those fighters. And that's obviously because they're Navy fighters. You look down from the top and they blend in with the ocean. You look up from the bottom and they blend in with the sky. And that's not as effective on a Star Wars spacecraft, but again, it evokes that feeling. Now, I also mentioned hyperdrive. So I imagine that like these greeblies in here are related to the hyperdrive. And having a hyperdrive also kind of naturally leads to maybe it has an astromech as well. And I'm imagining this is kind of like just the head. It can do navigation calculations, maybe some basic repairs, but it's very much like the astromech on Obi-Wan's starfighter in Attack of the Clones. Some of the other things that I did was like I added more visibility, not much, but a little bit. So TIE fighters have windows on the top, but they're really very useless slits. So I made kind of wider windows on the top and some windows on the bottom as well, so you can look out and see what's going on below you. I also thought that since this fighter is a little more nuanced, it needs at least a little bit more flexibility with its weapons. It's got your laser cannons, but these, I would say, are blasters that are more for like anti-personnel, and the cannons are more for vehicles and that sort of thing. It's a little more judicious with its firepower. Not much, a little bit. So let's spin around and look at this engine in more detail. The engine is very different from a standard TIE fighter, which has like these little pinpricks of red light, which we're meant to believe that those are its thrusters. There's all of this space back here on a TIE fighter, but of course that's a hatch. There's no engine stuff going on here, even though it's kind of a logical place for it. So I kind of thought it'd be cool if we, elongated the back of the cockpit, put in a nice big thruster here, and it's kind of lifted from the A-wing with this ring and the fin, though I kind of made it my own here. But I think that gives it a very aggressive and powerful feeling, and it's different than other TIE fighters. Again, I didn't want it to be a kit bash of the TIE fighter cockpit. I kind of wanted at a glance, oh, this is a different craft, even though it's from, by the same company, And I imagine you might see different paint schemes for different planets and different roles. Versatile, and that's the point, versatility. So that's my TIE Fighter. I hope you liked it, and feel free to tell me what you think or any sorts of recommendations or ideas that you might have. This model is up on Sketchfab for my supporters on Patreon if you want to take a look at it yourself. And speaking of Patreon, thank you so much everybody who's pledged support over the past week or so. The response has been really awesome and it's a huge boost and it means a lot. I'm going to be picking up a lot of steam with producing content exclusively for Patreon, so stay tuned for that. And the rest of you, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.